I'm kind of a fan of puzzles. So I started trying to decide, well, okay, let's just figure out what belongs to which aspect of life. And so here's this picture. Ignore the green crayon for a minute, I will get back to that later, and yes, those lines are supposed to be crayons. I'm not sure you can tell. But I started trying to color in the different puzzle pieces with blue and red, and aware that there's some yellow in the background, some aspects outside of gender and sex that but I really made a mistake in trying to do that. But as I was trying to define everything as, well, this is what girls do and this is what guys do, and men and women do this and that and all sorts of other stuff, I stumbled across the fact that there's people who exist outside of society's normal definitions of men and women, aside from just intersexed or hermaphrodites, which is a word I guess we're not really supposed to use anymore. And that really threw my equation off balance. The green crayon there, the one that's like, whoa, what is this? And at that point I kind of left gender and sexuality and sex alone for a while. I didn't want to think about it, so I just kind of ignored it, went along with life, didn't think about it for several years. No, at some point when I started realizing that I existed outside of gender norms, I came across this thing. It's kind of a list of, like, where are you? Where do you exist on the spectrum between male and female in these several different categories? And I thought that was great. I thought it was perfect. I was like, oh yeah, definitely, that works. Like where you are mentally, who you love, that's hard. I don't know if you can read it. It's kind of a small picture. What you physically are, and then like how you present yourself, like what kind of clothes you wear, haircut, I don't know, how you try and present yourself, even like mannerisms and stuff, how you present yourself to the public. I just wrote clothes, but that's not all that encompasses. And then I've heard that there's lists like these which encompass more than that, but I don't remember what all they encompass, so I didn't list them. That was kind of the bottom of my paper. That was the bottom of the page of my sketchbook, so I didn't have a lot of room to add anything else, even if I had remembered it. That still didn't feel quite right to me. And somewhere or other, I came across an image kind of like this. Which, again, still didn't feel quite right to me, but it was a lot better. It was a lot better. I was like, oh yeah, this makes so much sense. Finally, there's something that I can... I don't know where I belong in this list, but I've got to be on there somewhere. Thank God I finally have a way to define myself and put myself in a box, which is kind of ridiculous, but by the way, I have no objection to people labeling themselves. If you wish to label yourself, fine. That's great. Good for you. I just don't want to be labeled. I don't even know what label I would be labeled with. Anyway, but yeah, as you can see, there's like the male and the female side, and then as you get towards the middle, instead of just being a spectrum between male and female, there's people who feel like they're both. A lot of them go by the term bigendered, I believe, and they feel very strongly that they're compilations of both genders. And then there's other people who really feel like they're not either gender at all. And then, of course, there's tons of variation in between, which is why I colored it in sort of a spectrum thing, and I just stuck the yellow in the middle there because I needed more color. I'm not sure if it has anything to do with the rest of the yellow in these pictures, but it's there. So that was that, but I just... there's so much to gender and sex, and sexual orientation and personality, and how do you pick it apart? It just, the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. So, I don't know, some people can have a couple of really masculine or really feminine traits. There's traits that both men and women share. There are traits that would be considered very masculine by one society and very feminine by another society. I remember reading in, I think it was Leslie Feinberg's book, Transliberation, about how Jewish women would sometimes be harassed or possibly even arrested because they acted too masculinely. They were loud. They were loud. And apparently that was not okay with, it was probably American society, but in whatever society they were living in, and it was perfectly acceptable in Jewish culture, but apparently not in the surrounding culture, because Jews tend to have both their own culture and whatever the surrounding culture is. Anyway, I am Jewish, by the way. But yeah, the point of that is there's so much to it. I don't understand how people can separate it out so much. So I kind of came up with this image. I wish it were prettier. It was supposed to be really nice looking, and it was kind of nicer looking before I took a photo of it, but anyway, here it is. Okay, so, and I feel like if you want to, you can take a chunk out of that and label it as something, and that can be yours. It can be yours, that's great. But there's just so much that I don't really understand how you can define the world in terms of chunks. So I kind of just have this mishmash of a whole bunch of different colors. I took a lot of crayons out of my box and made that, and then I added some whiteout in there for highlights, because I felt like it. Anyway, that's not the point. The way I see gender, and it's not really all that separate from personality. You can't separate it that much from interests and everything else. It all goes together. I mean, and because it's all part of identity, you can't just separate them, is why I think you can't separate them, because they're all part of identity. I don't know. So anyway, that's how I see gender, and a little bit of how I think at least a decent chunk of the rest of the world sees gender. And this is getting to be quite a long video, so I should shut it off. Have a great day, folks.